Defending your point is very different to being defensive. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Nadine and this is Legally Diverse, a platform I've set up to help aspiring solicitors reach their goal as quickly as possible whilst keeping you motivated throughout the process. So today, I'm going to be giving you my hints and tips for legal interviews. Now, obviously, there are many different types of legal interviews. You can have interviews that focus on your motivation, or situational judgment interviews, competency interviews, or commercial awareness type interviews. So there are many different types, but the tips I will be giving you today apply to each and every one of those different topic areas. So if you have an interview coming up, stay tuned and we'll get straight into it. So tip number 1, check whether your interview is CV blind or not. Now, CV blind essentially means that the person interviewing you doesn't know anything other than your name. Now, it's important to know whether your interview is CV blind or not, because if it is, then you'll want to ensure that you include all of the information about yourself that you wish to communicate to the interviewer. So any qualities you have, any work experience you've done, any research you've carried out that has informed your decision to apply to the law firm, all of that, you want to make sure that you communicate to this interviewer, because unless you tell them in this interview, they will not know. And so any comments or feedback they have about you will be based solely on the information you provide to them within that interview. If it isn't CV blind, then that's not a problem. It's not a disadvantage. It just means that they've read your basic background information and everything that you've put in your application form to get you to that stage. Now it's about telling them anything else that you want them to know, re-emphasizing the points that you think are most important, and then obviously answering the questions that they set within the interview. So CV blind or not CV blind, if you know, it puts you in a better position to know what it is you want to focus on in your interview. Tip number 2, make sure you reread your application form, cover letter, if you submitted one, and CV before you get to the interview. Now, this is really important because essentially the interviewer wants to know about you. They want to know what it is you've done up until this date. They want to know what experience you have, what qualities you have, and what it is that will make you a great trainee at the firm. And in order for you to demonstrate that, you're going to be giving them all types of information, and you don't want to look unsure about the dates, the times, and the locations in which you gained the experiences that they are looking for. In an interview, you want to be most comfortable talking about yourself, because that is something you can control, that is something you know about, and that is the part of the interview that you can really excel at. So make sure that you don't get caught off guard by details that you can't remember. Tip number 3, make sure you do your research ahead of the interview. Now, in case you haven't watched my other videos, research is a very important component when it comes to gaining a legal position or a vacation scheme or training contract. So you want to make sure that you do your research on the firm and that you're able and comfortable to answer certain questions about them. So for example, you want to make sure that you know things such as their legal practice areas. What are their practice area strengths? Who are their clients? What commercial deals have they worked on to date? Who are their competitors? What are their values? And what skills are they looking for in their potential trainee? Like, there are so many things that you want to make sure that you research. And so I have created a post on my Instagram and I will put it here. I will also provide a link to the Instagram post in the description box below, so feel free to check it out if you haven't seen it already. It just provides you with different resources that you can use to conduct your research. So for example, Chamber Student, Legal 500, Legal Cheek, lawcareers.net, Roll on Friday, as well as topics and considerations whilst conducting your research. So different things you want to think about, different things that will allow you to compare the firm you're interviewing with another law firm, and different things that will allow you to decide whether this could potentially be the law firm for you. So check out that post for more information. Tip number 4. Now, ahead of the interview, you want to make sure that you go through some practice questions. You want to make sure that you get comfortable answering questions out loud so that when you get into the interview, it's not new. So Get a friend, a family member to ask you some questions, record your answers, and then listen back to them. That way you can hear how you sound when you're answering those type of questions, and you can get your feedback from a third party as to whether they think you answered the question well. There are very standard questions that generally come up throughout the legal process that you should definitely have answers to. And those questions are things like, why law? Why commercial law? Why, insert the name of the firm, what skills you have that will make you a great trainee, and what recent news story have you read and why did you find it interesting? These are very generic interview questions, but they do come up very regularly by most law firms at some point of the process. So by practicing your answers to these questions, it will definitely make you feel more relaxed and more comfortable in the interview because you already have an answer prepared. Now, there's also a website that has over 100 interview questions that you can use to practice. And I will also put that website in the description box, so make sure to check it out. Go through as many of those questions as you can and think about what answers you would want to give. What examples from your experiences would you like to draw upon? Note those down so that you're ready ahead of your interview. Now, tip number 5 is very much related to my previous point about practicing questions. And that is, don't go into the interview with a script. And the reason why I say that is because whilst it's very important to practice your answers to typical legal questions, you don't want to go into the interview and make your interviewer feel as though you are regurgitating a script that you've written down and you're not actually being authentic or engaging with the question that they've asked. Now, one thing that I always say is the best interviews are the ones that feel like conversations. So if you answer a question with a scripted answer, it doesn't actually allow you to relax and communicate the answer you're given because your focus is on getting out everything that you've written down. So instead, whilst you're practicing your answers to questions, maybe have bullet points or have topics that you want to cover or have examples that you want to give without writing word for word how it is that you'd communicate that answer. That way, when you get into the interview, your answer to that question can flow in a very natural way if your interviewer decides to respond to something that you said. It's also important not to use a script because obviously we all know that interviews can be quite a stressful, high-pressured environment. And so if you have a script and for whatever reason you forget a word or you forget a sentence that you wanted to put in the middle of your mental paragraph, it could throw your answer off completely. So avoid scripts if you can. Bullet points are preferable. Tip number 6. Now, in interviews, you're not going to be 100% confident and 100% comfortable with every single question that they ask you. And that is okay. In interviews, they do also want to see how you deal with a difficult situation, how you think, respond, and act whilst under pressure, and how you communicate. So if you get a question that you're not too comfortable with or that you genuinely need time to think about, just ask. My tip number 6 to you is don't ramble, take time to think. And the way you do that is say to your interviewer,
"That is a great question. Do you mind if I take a couple of seconds to think about that?"
Now that's an excellent way to communicate to your interviewer that their question that they've posed is a great one, but not one you have a automatic immediate response to, and you don't just want to say something for the sake of saying something. Now, I've received positive feedback about this point in particular. And that's because interviewers want to see that when you're given a question you're not sure about, you take time out before giving an answer automatically. And that's important, especially when you get in front of clients. Sometimes clients will ask you questions, and it's better for you to think about the most appropriate answer than to just say something in the heat of the moment. And then it's really hard for your supervisor or another member of your team to backpedal on the statement you've just made. So if you need time to think, ask for it. They would much rather wait for you to say something that could be right than for you to say something that's probably wrong just because you haven't thought about it. Tip number 7. Now, this point is a big one, and that is understanding the difference between defending your point and being defensive. And this point is particularly important when it comes to commercial law questions or case study questions. And I'll explain that in more detail. It's often said that when you get into an interview, an interviewer may ask you a question, listen to your answer, and then challenge you on what you've just said. And I've heard quite often that interviewers do that to try and catch you out, or to see if you'll quickly fold under pressure, or to see how you'll handle the situation. Now, sometimes that is true, but defending your point is very different to being defensive. And I'll give you an example. Defending your point is you saying, I think A. Then the interviewer will respond saying, well, I think it's B. Or haven't you considered B? And then you saying, okay, I can understand what you mean by B, but my reason for saying A is C, D, E, F, G. That is defending your point. You've made a point, they've challenged you on it, and then you've acknowledged their point, but you've backed up your point by offering further analysis, further thought, further communication as to why you still believe that your answer of A is correct. That is defending your point. That is the perfect way to show your interviewer that you've considered something in detail and that you're not just going to bend under pressure, but that you've also taken into consideration what it is that they've said. Interviewers don't expect you to know everything, but they do expect you to have a go at something and then to be able to illustrate why it is you got to the conclusion that you got to. Being defensive, however, would be for you to say, I think A, to which the interviewer would respond, well, I think B, or haven't you considered B? And then you saying, no, it's definitely A. I definitely think it's A. And then that's it. That's being defensive. You haven't actually taken consideration what they've said. You haven't actually given any further information or communicated how it is you got to your decision of A. You've literally digged your foot in the sand and maintained that A is the reason. You've repeated your point. Being defensive is not the way to go, because sometimes it could also be the case that the interviewer isn't necessarily trying to trick you out, but they genuinely think that you haven't considered something, in which case they could just be steering you down the road that they think you should be on. So pick up cues from your interviewer. If they're making a suggestion, at least think about it, acknowledge it, and if you still believe your view to be right, that is absolutely fine. Just give them further analysis and information as to why you reached that original point, and then you can stay there. Whereas if you think that their point is valid and probably correct, then acknowledge that as well, agree with them, but then still give them an understanding of why you reached A. That way they can see that you're willing to learn, that you're listening to their point, that you're considering all things, and that you're not easily bending. There's a reason for any choice and decision that you make. If there's anything you take away from this video, it has to be the difference between being defensive and defending your point. Tip number 8. Now, as always, I'm so happy that you're here watching my videos, but nothing beats speaking to people who are actually at the firm already and who've actually been through the process with the firm that you're interviewing with. So, for example, if you're applying for a vacation scheme or a training contract, make sure you reach out to trainees at the firm or future trainees at the firm on platforms like LinkedIn and ask to speak to them about their experiences. They can always give you better insight into the firm's recruitment process, into the firm's requirements, and into the firm's interview style, because they have literally gone through the process that you're about to go into. So don't underestimate the importance of reaching out to people, gaining their insight and any advice they have, because it is truly invaluable. Tip number 9, you have done exceptionally well to get to the interview stage in the first place. So that in itself should fill you with confidence. But interviews can be nerve-wracking, can be intimidating, simply because you're about to meet the people that will be assessing you for the position that you want. So I get it. And so because of that, I have put together an Instagram post about how to come across more confident in your interviews. So even if you're not feeling 100% confident, you will at least give off the impression that you are confident. And that is very important. So I'll put the post here, and as always, I will link it in the description box below. It just covers things such as smiling during the interview, if it's in person, shaking the interviewer's hand firmly before it begins, not talking too fast, because talking fast does also come across as if you are nervous, and many other tips. So I hope you find that helpful, because confidence is key. And so the more things that you can do to come across more confident, the better. And finally, tip number 10. Now, tip number 10 is all about the end of the interview when you are asked,
do you have any questions for us?
Obviously, the answer is always yes. Why? Because you are never going to know everything. You're never going to know everything about the firm, everything about the legal industry, or everything about your interviewers, even if you are told in advance who your interviewers are. So this section of your interview is your opportunity to ask your interviewers any questions you have about any of the 3 things I've just mentioned. So make sure you take the opportunity to do so. And because it's so important, I have recently released a whole 10-minute YouTube video about the do's and the don'ts when it comes to picking suitable questions to ask your interviewers. So make sure to check it out. I will link it up here and I'll also put it in the description box below. It is truly the best way to make sure that you conclude the interview in the best way possible. So make sure you prepare those questions in advance because this is the section of the interview that you lead. But yeah, that's it, guys. That was my top 10 tips for all legal interviews. I really hope you found them helpful. If you did, please do give this video a thumbs up. Feel free to drop a comment below if you have any questions or if you want to share any interview experiences of your own. I'd be happy to hear and I'd be sure to respond. If you haven't already, please do subscribe, share this video with your friends, and all the best in your upcoming legal interview. I'll see you in my next video, guys. Bye.